Howdy folks, you might all be wondering what in the world I'm doing throwing this tomahawk here into this tree. Well, this is just a glimpse into the brutal effectiveness to which this particular tool of the trade, as it were, was used by not only one of the most notorious river pirates ever, but also by one of America's first serial killers. Now, he did not act alone. In fact, history has recorded that the person he solely did a lot of his evil doings with was his brother, but in fact, they were actually cousins. So, regardless of this, we are going to be focusing on today, of course, the story of America's first serial killers who, throughout their putrid lives, ended up terrorizing Tennessee and Kentucky until they were finally brought to frontier justice. So with that being said, stay tuned for the story of Micajah and Wiley Harp. Alright, well folks, before we dive into today's video, I just want to say a few things. Typically, although with most videos I already had the script entirely memorized, this past week, in fact the past few weeks, have been so doggone busy. This week in particular has been exceptionally stressful and chaotic that I've not really had the time to memorize this particular script or article, however you want to call it. So aside from that, yes, I will be reading off the script, but aside from that, I also feel like this story of the Harp brothers is so vast that it really can't be done justice unless you actually make sure you get the details right, especially when it comes to remembering the dates and the names of the people who fell victim to these notorious murderers. So with that being said, we are going to immediately dive into the history of America's first serial killers. Now, of course, historians, they have noted many difficulties when it comes to these violent serial killers as to discerning what is fact and what is fiction. But what we can say is that they are believed to have been born in Orange County, North Carolina, as children of Scottish immigrants. Micajah, or Big Harp, was actually born in and around 1768, while Wiley, or William Harp, was born around 1770. Though many accounts identify the two as brothers, it is also possible they were first cousins. According to this particular theory, their fathers were brothers, John and William Harper, who settled in Orange County, North Carolina between 1761 and 1763. Like many Scottish settlers of the American colonies, the Harpers were Calvinists and thus advocate, loyalists, and supporters of the king. Prior to the American Revolution, Big and Little Harp's fathers may have served in Tory militias in the War of Regulation, during which the colonists in the Carolinas took up arms against continuing royal government interference by British colonial officials. When the Revolutionary War began, the Harp brothers the Harp's fathers tried to join the Patriot American forces, but were denied due to earlier associations with British loyalists. The negative treatment of the Harp family by hostile Patriot neighbors may have actually contributed to Big and Little Harp's feelings of persecution as children, and thus their desire for revenge against people they considered rebellious traitors was born. Reportedly, after some time, political tensions between the Harp family and local patriots had escalated drastically, culminating in an attack on the family home by local revolutionaries, in which the boys witnessed the lynching of their parents. Upon seeing this, the Harp boys are said to have fled into the wilderness and hidden for a while before they were found and rescued by members of the renegade band of the Chickamauga Cherokees. After being brought into the tribe, the boys realized that they held similar beliefs as their native caretakers, from whom they learned how to properly hunt, trap, and dress wild game and forage on native plants, as well as how to steal livestock, raid properties, and other various methods of how to best torture and kill enemies. Around April or May of 1775, the young Harps left North Carolina and went to Virginia to find overseer jobs on a slave plantation. Big Harp later traveled in the company of two women, Susan and Betsy Roberts, who were possibly sisters. Either way, both of them bore him children. Little Harp, however, married a woman named Sarah Rice, the daughter of a Baptist minister. Little is known of the Harps' precise whereabouts at the outbreak of the American Revolution, but according to an eyewitness account by Captain James Wood of the Continental Army, they joined a toy rape gang in North Carolina. These predatory, violently loyalist criminals took advantage of the general wartime lawlessness by beating, raping, stealing from, torturing, and murdering all who they found did not support the king, and they just simply didn't take kindly to. They also went on to burn and destroy property, especially the farms of Patriot colonists. The Harps gang took part in the kidnapping of 3 teenage girls, with a 4th girl being rescued by Captain Wood. The Harps also served as military associates, though they were not provided soldiers' uniforms, weapons, or pay by the British government. Like many other Loyalist volunteers, they survived via hunting, foraging, robbery, and also through the looting of corpses on battlefields. Captain Wood's son was Frank Wood, a Patriot soldier of the Overmountain Men Frontier Group, and the older brother of Susan Wood, who was later kidnapped and made the wife of Micajah Harp. Frank Wood claimed to have seen the Harp brothers serving loosely as toy militia at the Battle of Kings Mountain in October 1780 under British commander Patrick Ferguson. During the hour-long engagement, Wood took aim at Big Harp but missed the target. Later, the Harps served under the command of Lieutenant Colonel Bannister Tarleton at the Battle of Blackstocks and Cowpens. Following the decisive British defeat by Patriot and French forces at Yorktown, the Harps left North Carolina, dispersing with their Native American allies, the renegade Chickamaugas, to Tennessee villages west of the Appalachian Mountains. On April 2nd, 1781, they joined the war party of 400 Chickamaugas and attacked the Patriot frontier settlement of Bluff Station at Fort Nashboro, which is now present-day Nashville, Tennessee. Repeating the assault several months later, they attacked on either July 20th, 1788 or April 9th, 1793. On August 19th, 1782, the Harps accompanied a British-backed Chickamauga war party to Kentucky at the Battle of Blue Licks, where they helped to defeat an army of Patriot frontiersmen led by Daniel Boone. But during the Harps' early frontier period among the Chickamaugas, they lived in the village of Nickajack near Chattanooga, Tennessee, for approximately 12 to 13 years. However, during this time, they kidnapped Maria Davison and later Susan Wood. In 1794, the Harps left their Indian habitation before it was destroyed in a raid by American militia. The Harp brothers would later relocate to Powell's Valley around Knoxville, Tennessee, where they stole food and supplies from local pioneers. They may have disguised their Tory past from their Patriot neighbors by simply changing their original name from Harper to Harp. Harper, interestingly enough, was actually a quite common name amongst Loyalists during the Revolutionary War, particularly in North Carolina. But at this point, the whereabouts of the Harps are unknown after the summer of 1795. However, by the spring of 1797, they were apparently dwelling in a cabin on Beavers Creek near Knoxville. On June 1st, 1797, Wiley Harp married Sarah Rice, which was recorded in the Knox County marriage records. Sometime during 1797, the Harps began a vicious crime spree through Tennessee, Kentucky, and Illinois. The Harps later confessed to the killing of a confirmed 39 people, but the estimated combined total, including unknown victims, may number more than 50. They are alleged to have butchered anyone at the slightest provocation, regardless of age, including killing babies. What follows are the accounts of but a few of the murders that the Harps committed. In 1797, while the Harps were living near Knoxville, they were driven out of town upon being charged with stealing pigs and horses. They were also accused of murdering a local man named Johnson, whose body was found in a river covered in urine with his chest cut open and filled with stones. This weighing down became a signature corpse disposal method seen in the Harps' serial killings. After being kicked out of Knoxville, the Harps fled into Kentucky. They entered the state on the Wilderness Road near the Cumberland Gap. There they are believed to have murdered a peddler named Peyton, taking his horse and some of his goods. In December, they murdered 2 travelers from Maryland. Next, a man named John Langford, who was traveling from Virginia to Kentucky, turned up dead. A local innkeeper eventually pointed authorities towards the Harps. The criminal pair was pursued, captured, and jailed in the state prison at Danville, Kentucky, from which they managed to escape. When a posse was sent after them, the young son of a man who assisted the authorities was found dead and mutilated by the Harps in an act of retaliation. On April 22, 1799, Kentucky Governor James Girard placed a $300 reward on each of the Harps' heads. While fleeing northwards, the Harps killed 2 men named Edmonton and Stump. When they were near the mouth of the Saline River in southern Illinois, they came upon 3 men encamped there and killed them. The pair then made their way to Cave-in Rock, a natural cave on the bluffs above the Illinois bank of the Ohio River, and it was there that they found it was a stronghold of river pirates and criminal gang leaders, particularly Samuel Mason. Now, a posse had been aggressively pursuing them, but they stopped just short of the cave on the opposite shore in Kentucky. With their wives and 3 children in tow, the Harps found refuge with Sam Mason and his gang, who preyed upon slow-moving flatboats making their way along the Ohio River. Now, while the Mason gang could in fact be ruthless, even they were appalled by the actions of the Harps. And after the murderous pair were found to have a habit of taking travelers to the top of the bluff, stripping them naked and pushing them off, even Sam Mason had had enough, and he forced the Hart brothers to leave his gang. The Harps then returned to eastern Tennessee, where they continued their vicious murder spree. They killed a farmer named Bradbury, a man named Hardin, and a boy named Coffee in July 1798. Soon, more bodies were discovered, including those of William Ballard, who had been disemboweled and thrown in the Holston River, James Brassel, who had his throat viciously slashed and was discovered on Brassel's Knob, as well as a man named John Tully, whose body turned up later. A Mr. John Graves and his teenage son were also found dead, each having been bludgeoned with an axe in south-central Kentucky. In Logan County, the Harps killed a young girl as well as a young slave and an entire family that they had found asleep in camp. In August of 1799, a few miles northeast of Russellville, Kentucky, Big Harp bashed his infant daughter's head in against a tree because he was annoyed by her constant crying. Later on, he would go to state that this was the only crime for which he would feel remorse. That very same month, a man named Trowbridge was found disemboweled in Highland Creek. When the Harps were given shelter at the Stegall home in Webster County, the pair killed an overnight guest named Major William Love, as well as Mrs. Moses Stegall's 4-month-old baby boy, whose throat was slit because he, like Big Harp's daughter, would not stop crying. Upon Mrs. Stegall catching the Harps in the act of killing her child, she screamed, for which she was also silenced and murdered. The Harp killings continued in July 1799 as the 2 fled west to avoid a new posse, organized by John Liper, which included the avenging husband and father, Moses Stegall. While the pair was preparing to kill another settler named George Smith, the posse finally tracked them down on August 24, 1799. The posse called for the Harps to surrender, but they attempted to flee. Micajah Harp was shot in the leg and back by Liper, who soon caught up with him and pulled him from his horse, subduing the outlaw with a tomahawk in the scuffle. As he lay dying, Micajah Harp confessed to 20 murders. However, while Harp was still conscious, Moses Stegall slowly cut off the outlaw's head with a dull pocket knife. Later, the head was spiked on a pole at a crossroads near the Moses Stegall cabin that is still known as Harp's Head Road, along a modern-day highway in Webster County, Kentucky. Wiley Harp, however, successfully escaped the confrontation and rejoined the Mason gang pirates at Cave-in Rock. 4 years later, Wiley Harp might have been captured along with the rest of the gang, but went unrecognized because he was using the alias of John Sutton. Both Harp and Samuel Mason escaped, but Mason was shot. Afterwards, Little Harp and another gang member, Peter Alston, tried to claim the bounty on Mason. although it is unclear whether or not Mason died from the wounds sustained during the escape or whether Harp killed him. Regardless, as they presented Mason's head, a Kentuckian recognized Harp and Alston as outlaws themselves, and the two men were arrested. The two soon escaped, but were quickly recaptured, tried, and sentenced to be hanged. In January of 1804, Wiley Harp and Peter Alston were executed by hanging. Their heads were cut off and placed high on stakes along the Natchez Trace as a warning to other outlaws. Thus ended the bloody and notorious reign of terror of America's first serial killers. Whew. Folks, like I said, that's a lot of details to get in, but what a story. And again, I feel it's necessary to be thorough with the dates for this particular video because we have names and dates for a lot of the victims of these madmen, the Harps. And so, as a way of showing respect, you want to kind of get that information correct. That's simply the way I feel. But, I tell you what, aside from this week, studying and researching them was a rough ride. And this was just a summary of their outrageous criminal spree in the backwoods of Tennessee, Kentucky, and Illinois. It went far beyond that, but we don't want to get parents upset if their kids happen to watch this video, so we had to kind of water some things down a little bit. But that being said, folks, that brings this video to a close. Now, we hope you've, thoroughly enjoyed this video in some way, shape, or form. As gruesome as it is, that's what we're here for. That's what history is there for, to learn from, whether we like it or not. And so, to that end, I say, I thoroughly hope you've enjoyed it and learned something new today. As always, we want to thank you for your support on Facebook and YouTube. It is greatly appreciated, and we hope you'll continue to do so. As always, if you want to come on out and visit the Crockett Tavern Museum, our hours of operation are Tuesday through Saturday from 11 a.m. to 5 p.m. Our admissions fees are as such: $5 per adult, $4.50 for seniors and veterans, and $1 for children ages 5 through 18. We also encourage you to stay tuned on Facebook and YouTube to learn about more of our upcoming events. Our next one, of course, is going to be on June 27th, and we'll start advertising for that probably next week. But, with that being said, this brings the video to an end. It's been kind of a long one and also a bit of a gruesome one, so we're going to go ahead and keep things simple and sign off for now. Stay tuned for next week. We're going to be able to take a break from a lot of this macabre, just madness, really, from all these different horrible characters we've studied throughout this past month. So stay tuned for that. But either way, folks, I've already taken enough time out of your day, so I'm going to go ahead and get out of your hair. With that being said, this is Isaac White from the Crockett Tavern Museum, signing off for now, saying goodbye and God bless.